So what a day, right? This has been fantastic. In preparation for coming here, got all excited. I love Sydney. I've been here a couple times with the family, and got all excited imagining what it'd be like here, and this isn't what I pictured. What I pictured was maybe a little bit, okay, we'll have to talk about some of the basics of data. We'll have to talk about the basics of things. I can tell you that everything I've heard today and what seems like the comprehension in this room, this market is awesome, and I'm really excited to be here, and I'm honored to get the chance to tell you a little bit of my experience, a little bit of my perspective on what it takes to transform, and a little bit about some of the organizational stuff. So I've got a little bonus at the end. But let me start out just with a question. It many people have had an experience with a Tesla car? Yeah? Have you ridden in one or driven one? So let me tell you about my experience, because it illustrates something that's really important for understanding my perspective on things. So a friend of mine met me for lunch, pulled up in his Tesla. I got really excited, hadn't driven in one. This was a couple years ago. I reached for the door handle, touched it, the thing came out, right? Like, whoa. At first, thinking about it, I'm not that impressed. I kind of like my cars with the gas. I kind of like the noise. I kind of like to shift gears. But I got in this car, I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit open to this idea that this car is great. The door clicked shut. It's like the iPhone of cars, right? When the door clicked shut, I looked and there's this giant panel. He didn't let me drive. There's this giant panel to my left that's got, well, to you it would be to the right, but it's got all these numbers and stuff, and there's a button that says ludicrous mode on it. He pushes that button, and we go to get on the freeway, and I think we hit 60, 70 miles an hour in under 5 or 6 seconds. It was absolutely crazy. And I sat there in my seat, and I love cars that spew oil, and I just love old cars, and I thought, oh my God, this changes absolutely everything. I had one of those moments in my mind where I thought, the world has now progressed to a point that is far beyond my expectations. It's far beyond my understanding of what existed, and it's far beyond anything that I had previously comprehended. So I have to reformulate everything I think about cars. And now I don't own a Tesla. I will someday. But everything in my mind is now reformulated around the idea that this is the pinnacle of the automotive science, right? That pinnacle of automotive science changed me forever, and now even my 1986 BMW M5 doesn't measure up, right? It just can't. So how many of you have had those kinds of experiences where you go, oh my gosh, this changes everything, right? We all have those all the time, and I want to tell you, I sit here and I listen and we talk about data, and Jeff throws out, oh, data's exploding, and Mike talks about, I've been at this 20 years and whatever. All of that stuff is really interesting, but I want to step back and take a look at it and say, the platform Jeff talked about, the platform Mike talked about, the challenges that the world is facing and the tools that we have to address it, this changes everything, right? We now have the ability to do things that we could never do in terms of understanding our customers, in terms of delivering great experiences, in terms of aligning our technology, our operations, our teams, all along the idea of serving our customers, right? This changes everything, and I get really, really excited about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience at this company called Beachbody. Beachbody is a fitness company. Prior to that, I had a consulting company. Prior to that, I've operated and been inventing products on the internet forever. If you've ever registered a domain name or had a search box suggestion while you're typing, those are products I was involved in inventing, helped invent AdWords for Google as one of their largest partners. I've been around the internet creating lots of things for a lot of time, and I'm telling you, where we sit right now is really kind of right on the edge. Here's what's interesting. 73% of all corporate data goes unused for analytics. So I hear all these great platforms. I know as a customer, oh, and I need to finish up the Beachbody thing. Beachbody is a company that delivers streaming fitness experiences to subscription customers. And we built this system, and it was awesome, and it had all kinds of data. But then I find this fact, 73% of all data goes without being used to help analytics. And I think, how can that be? How can the gap in the world be such that this data is not being used? Well, I came up with 3 reasons, and what you're going to see is that these reasons really echo exactly what's been talked about today. I'm going to hit it from a little bit different level. I'm going to hit it from the position of a founder of a company. We started Beachbody, and here's the setup. You guys, have you ever heard of Beachbody? Have you heard of like P90X? Yeah, P90X? No? Oh, okay, you know Les Mills. Les Mills, you've heard of Les Mills. Somebody's got to respond. Okay, awesome. So Beachbody is the American version of Les Mills. It's a company that chugs out lots of fitness programs. The promise is you're fat, you get skinny in 90 days, and you have to work really hard to get there. And by the way, buy some food that goes with it. Unbelievable business, 1.2 billion US dollar business in 2014. I joined up as a consultant when they were looking at a question, and the question was, they had a this changes everything question. People were starting to use devices. People were starting to use the web. People were starting to use all kinds of different ways. In fact, they were taking our DVDs and ripping them so that they could make them more portable. The company was shipping everything only on DVD. So our challenge was go in there, figure out what do. We take all these DVDs, and literally it was a mess. They didn't even have some of the original files. We ripped the DVDs, put the streaming service together, and over 18 months, we built it into we generated $100 million in revenue, and we had 1.2 million subscribers, which made us one of the top 10 streaming services in the entire US. So this changes everything. Recognizing these opportunities, being able to take advantage of these opportunities, and ultimately the data that's generated is pretty awesome. But why do we only use 73%? There are 3 reasons, and there are probably 52 reasons as we've been talking today. I look at it as an executive, as somebody who started a big service, and somebody who created the focus that allowed us to grow really fast from 0 to 100 million. I see 3 reasons. The first is we have an unclear purpose for our data. And the unclear purpose for our data, there was a point in time where we just gathered everything. Throw it all in the hopper, throw it in your data lake, throw it in your everything. And I think we're still there. But now what we do is we look at that and say, oh, heart rate data. Heart rate data has a hierarchy to it. It's attached to this person. It's attached to this activity. We keep the metadata attached to it. We keep all of the things that make this data meaningful. So now we're not just collecting butterflies, right? Grabbing data, pinning it up on the board. Yeah, I just scored a whatever, like Pikachu, right? Or a Pokemon, right? We're actually gathering data for a purpose. You gather that data for a purpose, and that purpose is the customer experience. And the customer experience now is touched by, and I love the examples of we can enhance data and we can enhance the experience by doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and then ultimately, boom, this everything's different AI thing where we have to have lots of data. Well, here's something that's interesting. We in the US just passed the first $1 trillion company, right? And there are a couple others around there. If you convert it over all to Australian, we've got 3 companies, Amazon, Google, and Apple. Apple's the first $1 trillion company in Australia, and they're all $3 trillion companies. If you go back and look at the foundation of those companies and when they began, all the way back when, they all said exactly the same thing. And by the way, very few companies truly say this, truly live by it, and the $3 trillion companies are there. First one is Steve Jobs said, start with the customer experience and work backwards. We all know Steve Jobs was right brain, left brain. He gets credited for all kinds of things that he may or may not have done, but one thing he did is he led a company to the point where it was poised on the edge of being a $1 trillion company. And he said at the very beginning, if you understand the customer and work backwards, you're going to be able to build something great. And very few companies have ever been able to build repeated products that change everything. And then Jeff Bezos, don't listen to your customer, understand them. Truly understand your customer. The magic of Amazon wasn't that they can sell stuff and books, music, and movies, and it's great. They actually have created both sides of the market. They bring the buyers, they bring the sellers together, and then they make it so they can set the price for the transaction. Absolutely brilliant. So they can set the dial at any point, whether they keep 15% or give 15% back in order to bring that market together. That's all about data, and that was at the very, very beginning. So Jeff Bezos understood. By the way, I was a part of a company in 1998. I was with Alta Vista, and we were looking to buy a shopping engine because we thought Alta Vista was going to be the next big, most giant thing, and we approached Amazon and said, their total revenue was something like $1 billion, and we said, how about $5 billion to buy your company today? And he said, oh my God, that's not even anywhere enough, and stopped taking our calls. He knew what he had. He knew that by looking at the customer data, he knew that he had something that was absolutely fantastic, right? And then the third one is focus on the user and all else will follow. In true Google fashion, things are made, missives from, this is out of the 10 things that Google said, right? But focus on the user and all things will follow. Google does not promote their products, right? If you look back to when they launched email, or Gmail, if you look back to when they launched a thing called Frugal, which was a shopping engine, if you look back to the Google Labs from 10, 15 years ago, All of those things they built, they tested, they refined, they looked at the data. So they know something. So the wrap up for that piece is absolutely understand your customer, understand how you're going to use the data. Second reason why we're not using all of our data, it's disorganized and it's disconnected. So it's been said several times over, disorganized, disconnected means it's not all in the same place, and I'm a big believer, it doesn't all have to be perfect, it doesn't all have to be, at least to get a beginning, you just gotta get it somewhere where you can connect your data together, and you can take a look at a customer from the beginning of the experience to the end of the experience, the first touch all the way through a robust LTV. And so organizing your data and connecting your data, and in some cases, and I've been a part of this, organizing and connecting means grab a chunk out of that, throw it together in Excel, and run whatever kind of models you want to there. It kind of doesn't matter at the very beginning. Now, we've got a lot better tools, but the point is, don't let perfection prevent you from doing the things that are required to understand your customer. And here's why. If you understand your customer and you're looking at the data and it's all joined up in the right way, you can go from customer acquisition to renewal to upsell to cross-sell. And this actually came out of an Andreessen Horowitz deck that they're teaching all of their companies how to pitch. This, I think, is the simplest way to explain why we need all of this data. And I'll give you an example about Beachbody. So we had this streaming service. We took all the DVDs, we put them into the service, and we put it together online. And we had this interesting question, which is, what do we charge for it? We knew a DVD package was worth $69, but now we've got all of them. We've got 40 different packages, 10 years worth of 4 workout series. So we've got P90X and Insanity and all kinds of MMA stuff and whatever, and it's all lumped together. What do you charge for it? So we went and we looked at the data and said, okay, well, here's what we know. A certain number of people will buy the package and never start because it's fitness, right? You get a gym membership and you say, oh, I'm feeling great, and people buy and then they don't go do it, right? There's a percentage of that. So we had to understand that data in order to optimize the experience. But immediately after understanding the transaction data, we had to move over and understand the behavioral data. So we had to connect up with a single GUID. We had to look at who is this user we acquired, what package did they come in on, and then what did they actually do? You might come in to lose weight, and within 30 days, I'm not losing any more weight, I want to bulk up on some muscle. I might shift programs. That changes the entire trajectory of how retention works. We had that data, and now I'll bring in the Telium piece. We started this data journey with a lot of really smart people in a very bespoke, one-off approach, and we found Telium at that point in time, and I remember having a meeting with Mike where we said, we've got all this data, we are going to die doing all of our ETL, doing all of our data load stuff that brings it all together in one place. We've got to come up with a way to solve tagging, we've got to come up with a way to solve bringing all this data together, and that was where the Telium partnership started for Beachbody. And I got to say, it cut out tons of cost for us because we didn't have to build all the pieces ourselves. It saved a bunch in our engineering so that, and I was running engineering at the time, we didn't have to put 60 tags on the page. Just simply with Tag Manager, freed everything up so I could redeploy resources to understand our data better. It was fantastic. The holy grail, long term, is to understand your customer and I don't have to tell you this, right? You're marketers and data people. Understand your customer from pre-first touch all the way through building a high lifetime value. And this is where I get really excited because the lifetime value is where you change people's lives. As companies, when we touch people and say, hey, this is great, buy this thing, get thin, don't get thin, whatever you want to do, that's interesting, that's helpful. But when we could see over time, and the walls in the building were covered, literally covered with before and after pictures people would send in of them, sitting there very uncomfortable with, sad look on their face in front of a camera and in their bathing suit and falling out of it. And then 90 days later, trim, fit with a big smile on their face. And the quotes would be like, not that I'm fit now, is that my life changed, right? I'm more confident, my relationship with my family is better. All of these things, the data actually fed all the way through to the experience that people had in their lives. And to me, that's important. And that can happen with a fitness business. That can happen with any kind of business. You can look at it from the perspective of how you're changing lives. I love thinking about hospitals and how they can do a better job of changing people's lives. I love thinking about how Domo can make executives better at running their companies so that they can change people's lives. So the third is it's locked away in functional silos. I'm going to get a little bit personal on this one. I think we always like to talk about the functional silos as being about, it's about technology, and the marketing people have it over here, and the technology people have it over here. We have an issue, and you can say, oh, it's that, people speak different languages. I think there's a willingness challenge, right? The willingness challenge is for us to all understand why it's better when we get our stuff together. Now, you can use various technologies, Telium technologies and others, to bring all your stuff into the same place. But the real cost versus the opportunity cost. Real cost, okay, it's expensive to bring your stuff together. Okay, it's expensive to put this data layer in, maybe less expensive than doing other things. The people, the resistance, the challenge to getting that done is worth talking about, because the opportunity cost of getting everybody moving on the same page is giant. When people all start to share and understand ideas together and look at the data from different perspectives with the same language, different perspectives with the same objectives, things really begin to change. And I want to propose something very specific here. So who's familiar with the open source world, the Creative Commons license? Okay, there's a notion called copyleft. And copyleft says, well, copyright says, this is mine, you can't change it, you can't do anything with it unless you have a legal relationship with me. Copyleft is saying, I created this thing, I'm going to share the source code with you. If you enhance it, please share it with other people. Very open, very democratic. I love this approach. What I really love about this approach is we implemented it at Beachbody. And so the marketing people who were taking the data out of the system and looking at it, and then the next time I'd see it was in a management meeting, and they would calculate our LTV per user differently than somebody else would calculate the LTV. So not only were two people doing the work, we had the opportunity cost of all sitting around picking our heads trying to figure out who's right. Well, everybody's right because everybody's smart, but they're just using different criteria, right? So this notion of copyleft, I want to be really specific how it works. When access is given to the data in an organization, people have the responsibility to the team to share back what they've learned. And it is fantastic. When you think about collaboration, getting an engineer to sit down with a marketing analyst to say, what does this data mean? Does this mean this? No, it means that. Okay, great. And then they take that off and they come back and go, holy crap, I transformed it 3 times, threw it against this other data, had no idea that it matched with this data, and now we know that people, when they eat potato chips, are more likely to buy yoga, right? And those are the kinds of things that happen, right? So this notion of copyleft, I think it's novel to apply it inside an organization, and I'll challenge you guys to really think about that. If there's one thing you could take out of my addition to this piece, is get your people talking and get people to feel open about the knowledge that they generate, because that then gives the ability for that knowledge to build and to build and to build, and that gets rid of that opportunity cost of keeping data in silos. Does that make sense? I get kind of excited about that one. So this is all about change, right? It's about change, and this is where I said I get personal. My experience in working for companies like, and these might sound a bell, AOL. I ran search at AOL, ran some of the shopping and the monetization stuff at Alta Vista. I was global head of technologies at Reuters. In all of those things, it was never about the technology. I'm actually, my degree is not in technology, my degree is in business, but I understand technology, and I actually understand from a leadership perspective, it's far more important to create the environment where people are clear about what's happening and then can use their skills, delegate, use their skills to actually affect the change. So there's a theory of organizational change, and I've done a lot of research on this. You can get really complex. You can draw big boxes with 1,000 different motivations and quote 1,000 psychiatrists. There's a guy named Kurt Lewin who was German, came to the US in the 40s, and he's a psychologist. And he said, the most brilliant thing about change ever, you unfreeze, you change, and then you refreeze, right? It's really simple. So be deliberate. Here's where we are. It's the metamorphosis thing, right? Here's where we are. These are the things that have to be different in order for us to achieve this future state. That, to me, is the most general definition of what we have to do. If we want to create this copyleft culture within our companies, we have to say, here's where we are. We're kind of tight with our data for all these reasons, and some of them have to do with the wrong people being in charge or whatever else. The future is we're going to share data, and we're going to have lunches where everybody puts their PowerPoints up or pulls their dashboards up or pulls up their analytics tools and says, look what I learned, right? What do we have to do to get there? Well, we've got to create organizational incentives. We have to create some type of motivation for people to be willing to share their creative contribution, right? All of those things are the change that happens in between. So this is the bonus piece I talked about. I want to share my experience in creating change. So at Beachbody, this company, $1.2 billion company that had been doing essentially the same thing for 20 years, right? And then they bring in technology people and say, oh, let's do something different. We got to do this streaming thing. By the way, if we can't comprehend it, we're not going to do it, right? And you're asking people who are really good at television infomercials and who are really good at making DVDs with fitness content to understand we're going to go from buggy whips to Teslas, right? This is going to change things. This changes everything. So we had to start small. And my picture here, the lower line is the current state. This is where we are. All the area in between is the middle of change, and then there's the refreezing part, to stick with Kurt Levin's model. Now, the reason that there's a little gray area that droops off, if you're not committed to trying to work through that middle, so we want to put a copyleft thing in place. Okay, I'm going to send an email, boop, right? It's just going to go, it's not going to be successful. Right? So if you want to create that change, if you want to actually get the horsepower to move from the old state to the new state, there has to be commitment. And that commitment creates problems. My experience at Beachbody was there was a company creating this $1.2 billion business, and we had to say, we're going to go replicate the entirety of the business over here, or at least it's going to look like it. We're going to have our own technology team. We're going to have our own analytics team. We're going to have our own program office. We're going to have our own accounting group. We're going to do everything differently because this business is too important to mess up. We're going to go take a bunch of risks and make some mistakes. And that's what the commitment was. And I give a ton of credit to the founders of Beachbody to understand that and give us that chance. And so what we did was we were able to bridge up to the future state. Future state, anybody who ever wants to work out, when they see one of our commercials or one of our ads online, they can click a button, they can dial a phone number, and within minutes, they can be provisioned to be working out. Future state. They can be streaming. So they're sitting on the couch at 2 a.m., eating chips, and now, next thing you know, I'm moving, right? And I take my before picture, and I'm off and running. That future state was extremely motivating. Right? If you're a company that builds fitness products and you've got pictures of people with before and afters all over the walls, to be able to do that faster, more effectively is super motivating. But there's a problem here. Now we've got two organizations, both with large amounts of revenue, right? So, and it can be anything. So you've got this new copyleft idea. You want to give people the ability to take and contribute and change the content, but then or data. But then you've got, well, no, I do the analytics, but you just learned something new. How do you deal with that? Because you've got conflict, and there's always conflict in the system. This conflict, I put a red circle there because that red circle means this is danger. Because when you try to re-solidify, you unfreeze, move, change, and then refreeze. When you go to refreeze, people are looking at each other going, well, he does what I do. Who gets the job, right? Or this thing makes less revenue than the thing that is the old thing, so, maybe it wasn't successful because it didn't ramp up over a year to what took 20 years for the other business to do, right? This is where it gets really tough, and this is where leadership is required. The only guidance I can give here is, heads up, be aware, it's a challenge. But if you want to stick to the change, if you want to actually achieve the future state, you've got to do that. And I'm going to pause here for a second and point out, this change model works with everything. This change model works with wanting to get access, or even simply implementing Telium across your company. Hey, guess what? We're going to tag this way rather than that way. There might be one group that has a different experience, maybe the app group versus the web group, or however you're structured, they don't want to do this. It's about creating that vision of the future state, being really clear about what the steps are to achieve there, and then being mindful that people have feelings throughout the process. Here's what's great. As this happens, you can start to shift, you can start to prove, you take risk out of the system. Beachbody On Demand was a wild flyer. Do people want to stream? Do they want it on their Android versus their iOS? We don't really know, but when it started to happen, what we saw was really awesome. The business built, the future state started to materialize, and actually what was interesting was what we predicted. People don't want to buy DVDs anymore. I don't even, some people don't, my kids probably don't know what a DVD is, even though they watched Barney on it or whatever. But so the old business, the previous state, starts to decline, and you've got to be really serious about the future state. And that future state is really important for completing the change. So to me, all of the things we've talked about today with respect to how do we handle our data, how does the stack work, those things are absolutely critical. The ways that organizations change to accommodate new information needs to be managed, and that gives us the ability to fully take advantage of this thing that changes everything. So a couple quick takeaways. Oh yeah, money, big money. So actions today. View data through the lens of the customer. I don't need to say that again. Everybody has said that. I do like looking at the trillion-dollar companies because they get it. They get it in such a way that's black and white. They're the Tesla of the world that we live in, the technology world, or actually the world, right? Gather and connect your data together. Just do it. Hack, throw together, do whatever you can, try things. I always tell my teams, spend your time doing something, learning something, rather than drawing pictures on a whiteboard. Get out of PowerPoint, get out of Visio, get the code together, start to look at the output of the code, right? Increase sharing across the organization. I've underscored that quite a bit. And then be aware. This process is about involving people. And I think we as technologists frequently lose the fact that people have feelings, people have participation, and things that are important to them through these processes, and we can be much more successful. I would attribute this understanding of people to be one of the reasons why Beachbody On Demand grew so quickly, in addition to the really effective marketing that the company had and some other things. But the data underpinning that, giving us the ability to iterate really quickly, collaborate across the company was fantastic. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk here. I really appreciate this, and I'll be around this afternoon, this evening, and would love to have chats if there's anything people would like to hear about. Thanks.